Hi, Chad. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good, thank you. Great to have you on the show. You're over in Laguna at the moment.
Yep, Laguna Beach, California, my hometown.
Nice. And yeah, what have you been up to?
Well, I've been busy running the Surfrider Foundation. We've had a really slow surf season this winter here. La
Right.
Nina is not good for surf in Southern California, so I've been riding my snowboard a lot more than on my surfboard. But that's all about to change. The first south swell of the season's about to hit.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, we've kind of doing the reversal over in Portugal. So it's just been pumping for the last, I don't know how many months, and then
I,
still swell on the way. They've had yeah, quite a few storms of like bringing in some lows, which has been good. So
So
yeah.
of epic proportions. I see it on the on the surf media, biggest Nazare ever, and
Yeah, that kind of is sort of, I guess the focus on there is just getting bigger and bigger. And
yeah,
yeah, whenever there is a big swell, I don't know, it's almost like the Colosseum of surfing, right? Like you just get like thousands of people would just head down to the cliff there, like where the lighthouse is, and you can kind of watch it just over that.
it's sort of built for
Um,
that almost. I mean, it's on my bucket list to come visit. I would love to stand on that bluff and witness the. I've never seen waves that big up close and in person, so I'd love to do it.
yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
Nice. I guess I'd like before talking about the Surfrider Foundation, I'd love to find out. I guess the journey of how it all began and sort of how you got into it in the first place, because you're sort of born and raised in Laguna, and like wasn't your first job you were a lifeguard
yep.
at the beach there? And
Yeah, and it even goes back farther than that. My dad is an ocean science educator
Mhm.
and a really avid scuba diver. So he I was actually born in New York, but he brought our family to Laguna Beach
Oh,
in
right.
1970 before my brother was born, and and then we actually lived on Saipan, a small island in the Mariana Islands, for 2 years, where he taught high school. So
Okay.
my entire I recognize it now. At the time, I thought it was just normal, but my entire life has kind of been built around the sea, and I learned to swim when I was like 18 months old. And, I've spent all this time in the ocean. And then, I had a dad who was a ocean science guy.
Yeah.
Uh, so, I was just immersed like literally and figuratively in the ocean my whole life. So growing up in Laguna Beach, at least for me, I thought the ultimate job was to, go be an ocean lifeguard. And still, it's an incredibly difficult job to get.
Mhm.
uh, they put you through the paces, swimming in cold water for miles at a time, and it's challenging. But it was also still to the it's been many many years, but one of the things I'm most proud of, and just an amazing experience.
Yeah, and I heard like there was a like bit of a crazy story with some paint being dumped.
Yes,
Was this so?
yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of
Well,
I
there,
heard
yeah,
that you kind of witnessed. Yeah, like what happened there?
yeah. There's sort of two things during that time as a lifeguard that really, I think, just kind of shaped my future and kind of got me where I am today. So the infamous paint incident. So I'm sitting down on this uh absolutely beautiful, pristine coast. Like if you imagine the most beautiful cove in your life with white sand and blue water. It was early in the morning and there was nobody on the beach yet except me. I'm sitting on the lifeguard tower, kind of waiting for the day to start. And they were paving the streets in the neighborhood behind it. And I see this like yellow, front loader, the thing with the big trough in the front,
Yeah.
like bulldozer, driving down across the beach towards the water. I'm sitting there, I'm looking down the beach. I'm like, what's that guy doing? Like, he doesn't belong on the beach. And the front loader's up and he just drives right down to the edge of the water. I still had no idea what he was doing. And he just dumps the thing right into the swash zone. And it was full of yellow paint. The paint they were using to paint the yellow stripes on the road.
Yeah.
Uh, and I don't know, you know, tens, if not 100 gallons of this paint, a huge amount of this yellow paint. I was just shocked. It was so crazy to see, and so I picked up my little phone on my Lifeguard stand and called my boss and was like, what do I do about this? And meanwhile, this paint is forming this like a riptide, this yellow like plume into the ocean. And, they called and they I think, the contractor, whoever was in charge, probably got pretty seriously in trouble for it. But kind of like these oil spills we see, the damage was done, right? It was like, you can't clean it up at that point. It was quite a mess. That was sort of shocking to me in terms of like, wow, there are still people out there that think of the ocean as a dump, right? I mean, and we still live with that today, sadly, in many cases. But so that was that was shocking. Absolutely.
And do you reckon? I mean, was that sort of the moment that you thought, that you wanted to do something about this, like kind of going forwards? Is that?
Yeah, I think that was one of the like moments where you're like, okay, there's a lot of work to be done here. Like I have this appreciation for the magic and beauty of the ocean, but clearly other people do not. And the other one, is we have these beautiful kelp beds and rocky reefs off the coast of Laguna. And so me and my buddies, we were 16, 17, 18, we got excited about spearfishing. So we'd go out looking for fish to spear to eat. And we would go out and try to catch some fish, and we weren't finding any fish that were of legal size or, the good ones that are good for good eating. So we went back to the older lifeguards and we're like, hey, what are we doing wrong? Like, are we just bad at this? And they looked at us and said, no, the ocean's fished out. Very matter of factly, they were just like, the fish are gone. Like, we caught them all. Should have been here in 1960. And it was kind of amazing thing because it was it was accepted as the fact.
Yeah.
Bygone era, fish are gone. And I remember thinking to myself, well, like, wow, that's tragic and doesn't really seem right. And so that was another one of those kind of wake up calls. Like, really, we've caught all the fish. The other thing we had on the coast here was a snail called abalone. It's a delicacy. It's just something about this big around. In fact, I have with the shell. This is what it looks like. And these things are, right now they're like $50 a pound, but they also used to be stacked. They used to be stacked, I don't know, 3-4 thick on the intertidal zone, and people go out there and eat them. They're gone.
Wow.
They're hard to find. And so that was another one of those wake up calls that sort of motivated me. There's a happy end to that story, which is interesting too. Laguna is now a marine reserve, a no fishing zone. It's been that way for about 10 years. Very controversial issue, which the fishermen are opposed to, but it's teeming with life again.
Nice.
So my kids are looking at an ocean. They can't fish it, but they're seeing an ocean that's vastly healthier and richer than the one I saw, which, gives me some hope.
Yeah. And what did you do then? Did after that job, was that then when you wanted to study and you kind of
it took me a while. It was like a winding path, like so many young people. I was interested in the environment. I was interested in science. I was interested in the ocean. None of those were a big surprise because that was kind of like, what I grew up with. Yeah. I studied geology for a while. I didn't really realize I could make a career out of ocean conservation until a friend and mentor of mine in Laguna, a friend of my dad's, he said, hey, there's this master's program called Coastal Environmental Management. And the light went on. This is after I graduated from college. And I was like, oh, you can actually go get a degree and study protection of the coast. I was like, that sounds like exactly what I want to do. This was, in 1994, so quite some time ago. And I went and got into that program, spent 2 years there, and kind of that was the beginning of a, I guess now 30-year career getting involved in ocean and coastal protection, which I think I love it every bit as much today as I did back then.
Yeah. And then when you sort of began at Surfrider Foundation, was that just like on a voluntary basis? Were you like
so them, when I was in that grad program, I was broke. like most grad students. And
Yeah.
so it was a 2-year program. So the summer in between the 2 years, I was broke. So my dad ran an ocean science camp for kids. And so I came back and I worked for him to make some money. And I volunteered at the Surfrider Foundation for free as an intern for the summer. Yeah, I studied artificial surfing reefs that summer, which I then turned into my master's project at grad school.
Oh, nice.
And so that was my introduction. I was like, it was tiny then. We had like the organization had 5 employees. The budget was, less than $1 million. Well-intentioned, but very small. But I still loved it. I was like, this is an amazing organization. So it took me a few years after that to like get lucky and land a job. But that was when that's when I realized like this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And then when you got a job there, that was within the environmental department, wasn't it? So
yeah, so I started running like a program. It was a beach mapping program. About a year and a half after I was there, we were a staff. The environmental department was a staff of 2. My boss quit, and all of a sudden I became environmental director. So I ran the science and policy shop, which was just me. So it was it was pretty small. Now it's like a team of over 30 or something. But yeah, so I was running, and I did that for 15 years. I ran the sort of science and policy shop at Surfrider.
And how was that in the beginning, sort of when it first started, and then kind of growing out the team? And
yeah, the evolution of the organization's been really interesting. It was founded in 1984 by 3, before my time. I was 14, but before, founded by these 3 guys, Lance Carson, pro surfer from Malibu, a guy named Tom Pratt, who's an environmentalist, and a guy named Glenn Henning, who worked at the Jet Propulsion Lab. He was like a crazy engineer and scientist, kind of a mad scientist kind of guy. And, they were really focused on Malibu and Surfrider Beach, famous spot that was polluted and mismanaged, and, trying to find a way to get the surfers to have more say in the way the coasts were being managed. So it really went from protecting surf spots, and it was reactive, meaning, there were threats coming and we were trying to stop those threats. Over time it evolved from surfers protecting surf spots to what I would argue is surfers protecting the ocean and coastal communities. So the scope kind of broadened, and I think it continues to expand to surfers protecting, the ocean, to now surfers trying to protect the planet as we face things like climate change. And I think Surfrider was probably one of the first, not the first, but one of the first sort of surfing environmental groups. And now there's a global coalition of them. So it's kind of great to see the surfing world getting a lot more active in protecting, the ocean, which is essentially the fundamental landscape of our planet.
Yeah. And it's kind of sort of then, I mean, it looks at all these different causes as well, right? So it's kind of looking at everything from like coastal protection through to clean water and all the like plastic pollution, things like that. And was that something that was always kind of there, or did that kind of develop and evolve?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're a grassroots-based organization. So what that means is, right now we have 200 chapters and clubs across the U.S. and more in other parts of the world. But all those chapters are kind of focused on issues that are locally relevant to them. So it could be loss of a beach access. It could be plastic pollution in their town. It could be, some coastal development. This house kind of famously fell in the water a couple of weeks ago on the North Shore of Hawaii, which is a coastal erosion issue. And so there's about 150 active campaigns across the network. So broad variety of work. So we're like, okay, how are we going to structure and organize this? And, we kind of found 5 buckets: beach access, which is obviously an important issue; what we call coastal preservation. So these are the coastal erosion, flooding issues; clean water, pretty self-explanatory. We don't want to get sick when we surf, swim, and play in the ocean. Ocean protection, which is stuff happening offshore, could be fighting offshore drilling, or it could be establishing these marine protected areas and plastic pollution. So those are the kind of 5 buckets that we work on, and it helped us give structure and order to the work, and also limit the scope. We do everything. There's other issues like protecting whales and marine mammals and fisheries and international law of the sea. There's a lot of issues out there, but we're like, these are the ones that are most relevant to beach communities and people who are ocean users.
Mhm.
And if you think about it, if you think about protecting a surf spot, those are the kind of 5 things that would be relevant, right? If you can't get there,
Yeah.
then what's the surf spot? If the water's polluted and you're gonna get sick, which we see happening, then that's a problem. If they manipulate the coast in such a way it destroys the wave, that's not good. If there's an oil spill, that's not good. So those 5 issues, like if you think about how to protect a surf spot, it's really those 5 things are the fundamentals to protecting a wave. So we kind of have our roots in that, but we've gone much broader.
And are there sort of more like things being put into place to protect these spots? And like over here, we've got we've got the Ericeira Surf Reserve, and these are kind of popping up all over the world. And so like what kind of goes into that to make sure that they're all protected?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this is kind of that reactive proactive thing. Unfortunately, there continues to be a lot of threats to the health of our coast and ocean, poorly planned development, schemes to drill offshore, whatever it is. So we do have to like fight the bad things that are threatening the coast. However, if you're only playing that game, if we win, status quo, we prevented something bad from happening. When we lose, something bad happens, probably permanently impacts the coast that we'll never undo. And so if you think about playing that out forever, it's a losing strategy, because like if you're winning, you're just holding even. So the proactive strategies are, increasing the amount of protection we have, trying to get ahead of these issues. So in plastic pollution, we're trying to get rid of the sources of the pollution, not just pick it up off the beach every day. And if you think about the World Surfing Reserve program that Save the Waves, runs and we support, the idea there is like, hey, let's proactively manage these places, put a box on the map and say, this is an important, recreational, cultural, and oftentimes ecological resource that deserves protection. Now let's think about protecting it instead of just waiting for the bad things to come and fight them off. So that proactive kind of conservation approach is, really fundamental to sort of long-term health of these places. And they're so valuable, and I think that's becoming increasingly understood, which is really positive.
And that sort of ties back into what you did your PhD in, which was Surfonomics, right?
Correct.
Which is really interesting. And was that so? When you were studying that over the years, was that then looking at these locations and thinking, these are the benefits? It's not just the kind of the all the activities around the ocean that you can do there that's sort of brought in from surf tourism, but it's sort of looking at the economy from all that, like as a result of that, right? And kind of how it's going to benefit the area. And
that's exactly right. I mean, surf tourism, like any tourism, can be a form of sort of economic development. And if almost every coastal town in the world is dependent on coastal and ocean and recreational tourism. That's why people come to the shore. They come to the beach. They want to stay at a hotel, go to a restaurant. I live, Laguna's a tourist town. Surfers are a pretty important subset of that larger, global, I think the beach is, the number 1 tourist destination in the world. And surfers are a big part of that, but weren't really understood or appreciated. So just down the street from where I live is Trestles, one of the iconic surf spots in the world. And that's where I did my research. So I interviewed about 1,300 surfers, and they're coming from all over the place, both all over Southern California. I mean, people drive 90 minutes to get there.
It's not just people in San Clemente, right? It's people coming across, like you said, from everywhere.
7% of the people came from out of San Clemente, not to mention the international travelers. And, when they show up, they go to the surf shop, they buy gas, they go to breakfast or lunch, or they stay at a hotel. And so, kind of measuring and quantifying that value sort of speaks to a group of people who maybe aren't thinking about surfers as an important sector of the tourism economy.
Yeah.
And then the message is, hey, if you want that money to keep flowing into your town, in the case of San Clemente, 13 to $15 million a year in spending from these surfers, real money. You just got to keep the ocean clean and keep those waves healthy, which, mostly means just staying out of the way. And that'll just keep coming in. But if you screw it up, there's a lot of choices. I can go to Encinitas, I can go to Huntington Beach. So,
Yeah.
you're kind of in competition with all these other surf towns. And the best way to do it is to keep your beaches healthy and your waves clean. And you're going to have, that's going to continue to come. So that was that was kind of the impetus behind it. And it's become a powerful tool, I think, to kind of change the negative stereotype of, surfers who weren't really thought of as being, the old reputation of surfers like continues to linger on. When I tell people I did my, doctoral research on the economics of surfing or surfonomics, like every time I get a laugh, which is just an indication people like surfers, economy, that's like a moron. So
yes, and I guess at the same time, right? I mean, there'd be politics involved, and there'd be sort of, there's obviously groups and organizations that are going to try and stop that for whatever like their interests are, right? So that's something that you guys would be then up against.
Yeah, right. That's right. I mean, unfortunately, I guess for the same reason we're all attracted to the coast to surf, it's just, it's just the best place on earth. There are also people who want to exploit that. We were actually in the middle of like a big kind of series of fights in Puerto Rico where, so we established something called the Reserva Marina Tres Palmas like 20 years ago, a marine reserve around a big wave surfing spot called Tres Palmas. Mm-hmm. Beautiful, awesome place, some of the healthiest elkhorn coral reefs in the world. And, there's just kind of crazy overdevelopment, bulldozing hillsides, violating permits, and these are people trying to capitalize on the popularity of this surf town. But at the same time, doing it in a reckless way that threatens the health of the very reason people want to come there, and so we're Surfrider and other organizations, rallying the community to try to put a stop to that. So, despite our best efforts to be proactive, you often end up reactive. I say, sadly, there's always people with bad ideas out there.
Would that be similar to like places like Indonesia and sort of what's happened, I guess, with overdevelopment in Bali and things like that? And
yeah, it is interesting because I think, surfing as a global sport has really, oftentimes surfers are kind of the front runners that discover these magical places, and then tourism, Rincon, Puerto Rico included, and Bali also, that comes after that, right? So it was the feral surfers of the 60s and 70s that put these places on the map to begin with, and then kind of the more standard tourism follows. And sadly, if they're not well managed, that becomes the threat because because of the overdevelopment. And you can see in countries and communities that have strong laws and management, you see sort of responsible development, arguably Costa Rica, New Zealand, Australia, and then you see other places like Indonesia or Puerto Rico, or in some cases Mexico, where they don't have as strong of regulations and God, what's the word I'm looking for? Enforcement, that we see abuse, so it's like the surfers are in some ways, unintentionally can cause these problems. All the more reason for like the World Surfing Reserve program and others to try to combat that.
Yeah. And do you guys then work across like with different organizations? Because you said like you can't sort of manage and try and fight everything, right? So it's then working with different groups around the world and sort of collectively kind of trying to
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. We work, I mean, everything we do, if we're doing something at a local level in Laguna Beach, it's probably through a coalition of groups because there's a lot of
Mhm.
like-minded people out there, maybe with different perspectives that we have, but we share a common interest in these issues, getting rid of plastic or whatever it is. And then, globally too, Surfrider, we have affiliates in Europe, Canada, Japan, Australia, and Argentina, and Senegal. But that's pretty small chunk of a very, a lot of coastline around the planet, but there's
Yeah.
all kinds of amazing organizations out there. Surfers Against Sewage in the UK,
Mhm.
this Wild Coast that does a lot of work in Mexico, Salvamos Surf in your part of the world. And so, we actually, COVID has really set us back, but there's something called the Global Wave Conference that's been happening every other year, and hopefully it'll happen
Mhm.
next year. It kind of brings the globe's sort of surf conservation organizations together
Okay. Yeah.
to try to be coordinated, support each other, and work together to, because all of us have the same mission ultimately, right? Which is protection of these unbelievable coastlines and
Yeah.
communities, and ultimately the ocean and the planet.
And how's the relationship been within the surfing industry? So sort of working with the brands and the organizations there. And
You know, it's something I'm actually really proud of here in the United States. This When I took over leadership of Surfrider about 7 years ago, we didn't really have that strong of a relationship with the surf industry.
Mhm.
Um, and that has really changed for the better over the last, 5 to 7 years. We have a program called the Surf Industry Coastal Defender Program, and we probably have about 20, 25 of the surf brands participating in that at various levels, depending on their size. And
Yeah.
they're providing financial support, and they're also getting engaged on the issues. We just had a big DC, what we call Coastal Recreation Hill Day. It's a big lobby day in DC last week. We
Mhm.
had folks from the surf industry participating in those meetings, and a woman from Board Riders, which is kind of the Billabong, Quicksilver, Ruka group, folks from Reef, folks from Visla, uh, participating in those meetings. And it makes a big difference because it's not just an environmental group. Now it's an environmental group and a multi-billion-dollar business bringing the same message to the decision makers, which is like, hey, this is good for the environment. It's also good for business.
Yeah.
So, and Surf Industry Members Association, SEMA, it's the trade industry, they've been involved too. So I'm seeing a pretty big upswing in both support and interest from the industry, which is really encouraging because they are
Yeah, that's good.
powerful and a powerful voice. And they recognize, hey, look, we can't run this whole enterprise without a clean ocean. You don't see any of their ads with oil derricks in the background or oil on the beach or
Yeah.
plastic pollution in the
That's
water. They're selling a dream of a
bad for
pristine,
business.
yeah, they're selling a dream of a pristine, healthy ocean to
Yeah.
recreate in. And so to their credit, they're trying to help us make sure that's the case.
And so, like, where do you see it all kind of going forwards? I mean, would that then open it up to having that exposure more, it would be more members, and it would just increase that awareness, right?
Yeah, absolutely too. They have big audiences, and they speak to a lot of people. Their marketing budgets are much, much larger than ours. and yeah, that's actually a really important point. We have about 50,000 members in the United States, which is a decent number.
Mhm.
There's about 3 million surfers in the United States by best guess count. So, I don't think we have enough of them. My goal is, I feel like, we're an organization that cares more than just about surfers, but surfing's our history and our core. And my,
Yeah.
my goal is, I think we should have at least 1 in 10 surfers, which would give us 300,000 members. And that membership's really a source of political power. When we're advocating for these issues, it really comes down to how many people are going to turn up and how many
Yeah.
people care. And every time we have the numbers, we win. You know,
Nice.
when this toll road threatened trestles, you know, a decade ago, thousands of people turned up at those hearings, and you know, everyone told us it was an unwinnable campaign. But it was literally just the sheer number of people who came that turned the corner, and the surf industry can play a big role in helping us get people to sign up and join.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically affects anyone that kind of wants to go down and enjoy the beach or be in the ocean, right? It's not just sort of
No, no, that's
like
right.
it's not just surfers. It's kind of, anyone that
Yeah, I
if kind
mean,
of if
if
you're
you
going to
think
go
about
down there and yeah.
absolutely, if you think about clean water and healthy beaches, that's of benefit to anyone who wants to go. And we really, we have a history in surfing, and we think surfers should participate, but we're certainly not only that. And some of our best activists, have never stood up on a surfboard, but they care about their coastal community and want to see it protected. So, yeah, it's certainly not exclusive. That said, I still think these surfers should all be joining. Uh, a membership at the Surfrider Foundation is $25. That's often someone's coffee budget for the week.
Yeah.
And so here's my plug. I encourage everybody to get on our website at surfrider.org and join for $25. And there's power in those numbers.
Nice. And what do you have coming up? Have you got any sort of projects that you guys are kind of working on this year?
Yeah, we just launched a new strategic plan in the last month or so. We really are focusing on 3 issues, climate change being the biggest one. I can tell you kind of what we're doing there. Plastic pollution, not surprisingly. And, we're setting our sights, at least in the US, and just eliminating all single-use plastic in the next decade. And I think that's doable. We can solve that problem. And then the other one is on clean water, and kind of like Surfers Against Sewage in the UK, which has famously been sort of fighting these horrific sewage pollution issues. Sewage pollution is becoming a bigger problem in the United States. A lot of the infrastructure we put in the 70s is now 50 years old and starting to fail. So when you hear about infrastructure, in the US, we're talking about infrastructure and the need for the government to fund infrastructure. Part of that is our clean water infrastructure too. And, climate change is the 600-pound gorilla in the room, and sea levels are rising, and they're going to continue to rise no matter what we do. And that's going to impact our coastal communities, like that house falling into the water on the North Shore that I talked about. So adapting to sea level rise and climate change in our oceans is going to be fundamental to protecting our ocean waves and beaches. And the other thing that's interesting is our coasts and our ocean can be a real solution to climate change. They call it blue carbon. So wetlands and mangroves and seagrasses and kelp absorb about 5 times as much carbon as the rainforest. So if we protect and restore coastal ecosystems around the United States and the globe, we can suck a lot of carbon out of the air. So, we're both adapting and trying to make sure the ocean's part of the solution. So that emphasis that's a relatively new emphasis for us. And it's obviously super important. So we're going to be spending a lot of time and energy trying to address those climate change issues on the coast.
And then that would be working with all the different chapters globally and
absolutely
within the strategic plan, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the kind of recognitions, we think about the oceans as being oceans, right? The Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian, but at the end of the day, it's actually one, right? It's one connected ocean. There's some great maps out there which like flatten the earth and take away the land, and you just see the sea, which is 70% of the planet. So that really, unites us all. And the issues that you're facing in Portugal, or I'm facing in California or Australia or Japan, they're really fundamentally the same at the end of the day. So, and we need to tackle them at a global level, whether it's plastic pollution or climate change or any of these issues.
Nice. So much to do. And how, for all the people out there listening, how can they get involved, and what can they do? What's the best way to help?
Yeah, I mean, there's basically 2 ways to help. Join the Surfrider Foundation here in the United States, or whatever the local one is, or some other ocean conservation organization if we're not in your country. So, and that 25, 50, $100 a year makes a huge difference collectively. So if you're too busy and you don't have any time, throw some money to one of those organizations and join as a member, because that is also really powerful. And then the other side of it is, we're a roll up your sleeves, get the job done organization. There's beach cleanups. We're working with restaurants. We're testifying at city councils. We're getting involved politically in DC. So volunteer, and because it's a numbers game. And if we all work together collectively, there's nothing we can't accomplish if we've got enough people on our side.
Nice one. And there's also some different groups. So, for example, on social media, like over here, for example, there's different Facebook groups for Lisbon. There's one for Porto. So different cities and different sort of chapters within the countries have various sort of things going on, don't they?
That's right. I think I believe we have 4 chapters in Portugal in Surfrider Europe. And I mean that's the other thing. Our sort of theory is you get involved locally. That's the most important. It's relevant, right? You go down the street and into your community, and these are your friends and your fellow residents of your community. You can get a lot done at the local level. And then what we do is we try to scale that up. In the case of the states, that would be up to the state and federal level. In Europe, that would kind of be at the country or the EU level. So the idea is get involved locally and you get plugged in, and within the organization, we can help you have an influence at those higher levels, which is also pretty fun and exciting because we demystify the process of political engagement. Quick aside on that, which is interesting. I was talking to one of our pro surfer ambassadors here in the US. He came to DC with us in 2020, I guess, before the world shut down, and he participated, and we were lobbying all of our different representatives, and he said to me, hey, before this experience, I didn't vote. Wasn't really involved politically. And I thought that was the protest, right? The system is corrupt. Therefore, I refuse to participate in it. And what he realized is that's actually kind of the worst thing you can do, because if you're not participating, the oil and gas industry, the plastics industry, the sort of coastal development industry, they're there every single day with their lobbyists trying to get what they want. And so his protest was just making their lives easier. So the only way to combat that sort of, the system's certainly tilted in the US and a lot of places towards corporate interests. They've got the money, but we've got the numbers. So the best way to combat all of that, instead of being cynical and just saying, I'm not going to participate, the best way to do it is to actually get engaged.
Yeah.
And
so if people speak up, right, instead of being silent and
less armchair quarterbacking, more real-time engagement.
Yeah. That's it. Cool. Chad, thanks so much for your time. It's been awesome having you on. And I encourage anyone to go and get involved wherever wherever you're based. And it's awesome work what you guys are doing.
Oh, hey, thanks so much. It was a real pleasure chatting with you. This was a lot of fun.
Cool. Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, thank you.